Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video we're going to be talking all about witchcraft, health and safety. Now this video was recommended by a wonderful user of my Discord server. The link is down in the description box if you would like to join the server and join the community where you can chat all about witchcraft, magical practice, spellwork, paganism, all of that jazz. The link is down in the description box. But this is actually a really important topic that I think doesn't get touched on a lot. Within the magical community, there is a lot of information about the potential dangers of spellwork and ritual. There's a lot of information out there about how witchcraft could potentially be harmful or dangerous, but there isn't all that much information about the health and safety when it comes to practicing witchcraft. The things that can put you in harm's way, the things that you should probably avoid to keep yourself safe. I've been in the community for a decent amount of time now, and I have seen online communities come and go, and I've read so many books on the subject, and very few of them actually talk about the mundane health and safety of witchcraft. And unfortunately, a lot of people, particularly beginners, do have the idea that witchcraft and magic is somehow completely separate from the physical, mundane world. And the problem that that can cause is that there are often things within health and safety that you might apply to your physical, mundane life that aren't necessarily applied to your magical life when they really should be, because there are some things within the magical community, there's some items that you might use, practices that you might undertake that are ultimately dangerous if they are done incorrectly. And so witchcraft health and safety is important. And yes, this hand motion is going to be done a lot in this video, I suspect. Health and safety. I don't know, it just fits. It just goes with it. So I have broken this video down into multiple different parts. The timestamps will be either in the description box or in the pinned comment, so you can bounce around from different parts of this video if you do want to just check out certain parts of this video. But I hope that this is ultimately useful, and please do your own research after this video. If there's a particular topic that you are really interested in diving more into, go away, do some more research, make sure that you are always staying safe. And it's like my top priority with all of this. Learn good information and keep yourself safe. So first up, we have herbs and plants. Now I know I'm going to get a comment about this, so I'm going to mention it now. I live in the UK, and here the H in herb is pronounced. I know that in lots of other countries it's pronounced herb, but in the UK we do pronounce the H. So apologies if that's going to really annoy you, but here we pronounce the H, so I'm going to keep pronouncing the H. But a lot of plants and herbs are used by magical practitioners for spellwork and ritual, and a lot of people are under the misconception that just because it's natural, it must be safe. When in reality, if it's natural, it does not make it safe. There are so many plants and herbs out there that are very dangerous to work with if you don't know what you're doing. So in one of my last videos, we spoke about mandrake, and that is one of the many plants out there that is very dangerous to work with if you don't know what you're doing. And given the history and the track record of that plant, a lot of people learned it the hard way, and that is not what we're aiming for here. We want you to learn the plants that are safe and the ones that aren't before you start getting into your magical practice. That way, everyone stays safe. So before you use herbs and plants in any way, it's always a good idea to make sure that you know whether they're safe to use or not. I'm going to do my best to add some links in the description box that will help you have an idea of whether or not the plant is generally considered safe. But as we go into this, you'll see that there's lots of ways that a plant might be unsafe, and it's going to entirely depend on you as a person, your medical history, medications, and how you plan to use it. There are lots of ways that you can use plants. Some of them are safer than others. No matter how you're planning on using it, I would always recommend doing your research on whether it's safe or not for you individually. But using herbs and plants within candle magic, using them within spell pouches and spell boxes are generally some of the safer ways of using plants and herbs. Generally speaking, if it is outside of yourself and you are not allowing it in direct physical contact with you, you are not breathing it in, you are not consuming it, and it doesn't have the potential to seep into your bloodstream, then typically it is a safer way of using the plant. But there are lots of ways out there that are less safe. So using anointing oils on the skin, you always need to make sure that you are going to someone who's done the research on whether or not the plants are safe to go on the skin, and always do a patch test. That applies for oils, salves, balms, lotions, whatever it might be. If it's a herbal item and it's going on your skin, I'd always recommend doing a patch test first to make sure that you are not allergic to it and make sure it's safe to go on the skin to start off with. And if in doubt, don't put them on broken skin because it does allow it to easily get into your body compared to if your skin has no imperfections, no cuts, no breaks in it. Now, alongside things going on the skin, it also includes things that are going into your body. So things like teas, kitchen witchcraft is another one. Make sure that everything that you're putting into that food is safe for you to consume. Drinking water, any herbal infused waters, as well as things that you are breathing in, like loose incense, like dream pouches are another big one that people tend to overlook. Something that's sitting under your pillow that you are breathing in the scent of. You have to make sure that that is safe for you to be breathing in. And that's really what we need to be looking out for when it comes to using plants and herbs within our general lives, but also within magical practice. Natural doesn't mean safe, and I have seen a lot of books recommending incenses that have very toxic ingredients in them. I have seen people recommending items that are potentially dangerous depending on you as a person. And so it's really important that we make sure that we are not having any interactions with medical conditions or medication. So one thing that people often forget is that a lot of the basic components in medication that we might take are often derived from natural sources. And natural sources like plants are able to interact with medication and health conditions and can negatively influence them. So there are a lot of herbs out there that should not be used if you are pregnant, if you are breastfeeding, or if you are on certain medications. I'm sure anyone that's taken medications in the past and has looked at that giant flyer inside, which I do because I am a hypochondriac, it will say in there often, don't take this medication with St. John's wort. That's a really common plant that does have medical interactions and it can really mess with medication. There's a lot of plants out there that will negatively alter the effects of medication, and there's also a lot of plants out there that will cause medication to just stop working. So for instance, if you are on birth control, there are some plants out there that are able to actually stop the effect of the birth control medication. So yeah, please be cautious with all of that. Make sure that you know what you're putting into your body. The same goes for pre-existing medical conditions. A lot of plants might exacerbate conditions that you already have. Even if you don't consider it to necessarily be extreme, it's always better to make sure that you check with a doctor or a specialist before you start taking anything internally that has the potential to negatively impact your health. And then you also have the potential for allergies. A lot of people might not have come in contact with the herbs and plants that they suddenly start using when they practice witchcraft. And so if you are planning, as I mentioned earlier, to use any balms, to use any oils on the skin, make sure that you do a patch test to make sure that you aren't allergic to anything first. Now, I know that was a lot of information all in one go, but herbs is something that I see a lot of people getting themselves in trouble with. They might be using a herb that negatively influences their medication, or it might exacerbate pre-existing medical conditions. And I think it's always important to remember that natural doesn't mean safe. And so it's really important that we do take the care to respect the plants that we're working with. Plants are very, very powerful healers, and they're also very, very powerful hurters. I know it's not really a technical term, but you know what I mean. They can heal, they can hurt. So please take your care when using them. Make sure that you're safe, and also make sure that the part of the plant you're using is safe to use. This is something that I see overlooked a lot. A plant might be safe to use in some aspects. There are a lot of plants out there where the tubers or the roots might be safe, but the leaves are not. The flowers might be safe, but the tubers aren't. The bark is not safe, but the wood is. And so it's really important to take note which aspects of the plant a book is referencing. Because for instance, if a book will say the flower of a plant and you start using the body of the plant, it might only be the flower that is safe for you to use. The rest of it might not be. So always assume that a plant is going to hurt you until you've done adequate research on it. And it doesn't just apply to you. It also applies to furry friends. Now, most people that have been on this channel for a while will know that I typically prefer animals to people. I'm sorry, I love you guys, I really do. but there's something about animals, they're just so cute, and I don't know, I love animals, and the idea of hurting animals, even inadvertently, makes me, I don't like it, and I think it's really important to remember that if a plant is safe for you, it doesn't necessarily mean that the plant is safe for your animals. Now, this is true for cats, dogs, rodents, birds especially. They will often have really severe reactions to plants, even if they're only in the same room as them. So a big one I know of is lilies. Cats and lilies do not go together, and it can cause some serious heartache when things go wrong. Now, I've seen a lot of TikToks recently, hence my last TikTok reaction video, and I'm really alarmed by the number of people that are giving plants and herbs to their animals to get them to smell it to see if it's suitable for a spell work and ritual. And I think it's really important to remember that just because our body might be able to cope with breathing in a plant, that doesn't necessarily mean that a dog, a cat, a rabbit, a bird is capable of tolerating the same plants that we are. So if you do have any feathered or furry friends, please make sure that you do your research and make sure that all of your plants are locked up nice and safe so that they don't get into them, because honestly, I would hate anyone's animals to get hurt by a slip up or an accident of just leaving something out on a side. There are a lot of things that we can consume as people, but animals can't. And the same applies to even just breathing in or being in the same room as a plant. If you're able to smell a plant, that means particles of that plant are in the air. And if you can smell it, your furry or feathered friends are capable of smelling it too. So when it comes to plants, if in doubt, swap it out. If you aren't certain on whether or not a plant is safe, but you have an alternative that you know is safe that will work within that spell or ritual, swap it out. It's always better to be safer. Even if that means you only use 5 herbs in your entire magical practice, it's better than putting yourself and your animals at risk if something goes wrong. So do your research, and if in doubt, swap it out. Genuinely, it's much better to be safe and just assume that natural does not mean safe. So enough about herbs and plants, let's move on to the next thing. Crystals. Now, this is something that is exceptionally popular right now. Crystals seem to be everywhere, like actually everywhere. Last year, I went into an Urban Outfitters and they were selling crystals, and I'm a little confused as to why, but they were. Crystals are very, very popular right now. A lot of celebrities are advertising their use. A lot of YouTubers have them. Just a lot of companies in general are using crystals in advertisements and on their websites, and it's all just a big thing. But crystals are also not entirely safe. They might seem completely mundane, but it's important to remember that the basic components of these crystals and minerals might not be safe for you to use. And the safety of them entirely depends on how you plan on using them. So I know that a few years ago, there was a really big popularity in crystal-infused water, or crystal infusions, crystal elixirs. They go by a lot of different names. The idea of this was essentially to infuse water, typically drinking water, with the energy of crystals, and I saw a lot of people putting crystals inside water bottles that was not safe to drink. Now, I think it's really important to remember that the basic components of minerals, crystals, and stones, when put together, might create a beautiful decorative piece or an energetic piece that you want to work with in your magical practice. Those basic components might be really, really harmful to you, and they're often leached out in water. So if in doubt, don't put any crystals in water unless you know it's safe, because some crystals will leach heavy metals, some will dissolve in water, and you're essentially taking in all of those components that might not be good for you. Some will also leach things like cyanide, which is not something that you want to consume. So you can make crystal elixirs without actually having the crystals in contact with the water at all. You can have a bottle or a glass, and then you can put the crystals around the outside of it. That is a way of doing it. There are a lot of companies out there that do sell these crystal water bottles where the crystals are actually set inside glass or plastic to stop the crystals from being in direct contact with the water. I have one of these that has a glass core, and it is really, really good. So if you do want to go down that avenue, there are options out there that are definitely safer than just putting crystals in water. Now, this also applies to cleansing crystals in water. Generally speaking, if a stone ends in ite, so malachite, pyrite, calcite, they often have a negative interaction with water. they might dissolve in water, or they might leach minerals into that water that you really shouldn't be drinking. And so I would personally recommend not cleansing crystals in water until you know what is and isn't safe to go in water. This also applies to baths as well. Not recommended to sit in a bath full of crystals that are leaching heavy metals into the water, but I will leave that up to you to do a bit more research on it. Hopefully in the future I'll do a video on the crystals that are safe to go into water and the ones that aren't. Now, another really popular thing that people do with crystals, and it seems to be exceptionally popular right now, is wearing crystals in jewellery. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hearth, what could go wrong with wearing crystal jewellery? Well, it entirely depends on you and how you interact to metals, minerals, and stones in general. So two really common things that people are allergic to are zinc and copper. I personally can't wear zinc jewellery at all. It irritates me so bad. Even my earrings, if I'm wearing them for just 5 minutes and they're not silver, like silver plated, my ears are bright red, they're so irritated, I can't do it. Now, some stones and crystals will include zinc as one of its components, and so if you are allergic to zinc, you may well then have an allergy to that stone. Now, alongside zinc, people are also allergic to copper. Now, copper is actually found in malachite, and that is why synthetic malachite became so popular. One, malachite's very expensive anyway, but also a lot of people weren't able to wear malachite jewellery because they had a severe copper allergy. And because malachite is basically copper, that's what makes it so heavy. It's really important to remember that if you have a copper allergy, you might not be able to use malachite. And so generally speaking, if you have a piece of jewellery that is resting on your skin and you're finding you're getting a rash underneath it, you're getting eczema, it's irritated, it's itchy, it might well be because you have an allergy to some component of that stone or crystal. And in which case, it could be worth checking the components and see if there's anything in there that you know is an irritant for you personally. Now, when it comes to crystals, there's also the idea of health and safety for the crystals themselves. Some crystals will need more maintenance than others, and some crystals are very sensitive to certain environments. So typically, satin spar, selenite, and desert rose, because they're all made of gypsum, they're all very susceptible to moist conditions. So if you put a selenite bar or a satin spar piece in a bathroom, you might find that after a few weeks, it's gotten a little smaller, and that's because they do dissolve really easily in damp environments. And so if you do have any stones or any crystals that are susceptible to moisture in the air, it's better to put them somewhere nice and dry. And this is also true for heat and sunlight. There are a lot of stones out there that will fade really quickly in direct sunlight. Amethyst is a really common one. If you put a dark piece of amethyst on a windowsill in a really hot environment with lots of direct sunlight, even just within a few hours, you may well notice that that stone has faded to an almost grey colour because the heat and sunlight completely strips the colour out of that stone. And the same kind of applies to selenite. That typically goes a weird kind of sickly yellow colour when it's in heat and sunlight. So if in doubt, keep your crystals away from direct sunlight and away from damp environments for kind of best maintenance, a crystal health and safety, so to speak. Now, when it comes to health and safety, it is important to also remember your animals, your furry and feathered friends. Now, when it comes to stones, a lot of animals are attracted to them based on their components. So you'll often find that any item that contains a large amount of salt will very quickly attract animals. And this is something that I think is really important when it comes to Himalayan salt lamps. Not necessarily a crystal in the way we might consider it, but a lot of people do have Himalayan salt lamps. And if it is a real salt lamp that is made of actual salt, you will often find that animals are really fascinated by it and they want the salt. There are a lot of animals out there that won't necessarily acknowledge when they've had too much salt. So whereas you or I might notice after we've had a salty meal that we're really, really thirsty and we've gotten really bloated and we need to drink a lot of water to bring down our salt levels, some animals don't have that same capability to acknowledge when they've had too much salt. And there are so many cases, especially of cats, actually becoming obsessed with salt lamps, licking them for hours and hours on end, and they end up in really bad conditions. So if you do have an animal that seems really interested in a stone, it's worth looking up the minerals within that stone to make sure that it's not something that is going to really negatively hurt your animal. And if you do have salt lamps, no matter what kind it is, whether it's pink Himalayan salt or standard white salt lamp, that you do make sure that you are keeping it out of reach of animals, especially cats, cats, because I've noticed a lot of people posting cute cat videos of their cat licking a salt lamp, and all I can think is, please stop it now, please. Keep your pets safe, please, because animals are nicer than people. I think most of us know this. Animals deserve our protection. They deserve our love. Next up, essential oils. This is something that is so popular. I know so many people that use essential oils, even outside of the magical community. A lot of them are pushed by companies that are a little bit questionable, but you will find a lot of people will use essential oils. And I've noticed a lot of people using essential oils very unsafely, and it kind of stresses me out. Now, just as with herbs and plants, it's important to remember that essential oils aren't safe just because they're natural. I've seen a lot of people toting the idea that because essential oils are derived from plants, that means it's 100% safe because it's derived from nature. That makes it safe, right? When realistically, essential oils are exceptionally concentrated. They are essentially the essence of that plant. They are essential oils. And that means that whatever components were in that plant that made it potent are going to be in that oil. And so if you have a plant that you are exceptionally sensitive to, if you have a plant that interacts with your medical conditions or your medication, the essential oil is going to interact with it too. And if anything, it might interact with it to a higher degree because essential oils are so concentrated. Now, essential oils are different to infused oils. Infused oils are oils that are steeped with herbs and items to slowly infuse the base oil with the components of the plant. An essential oil is a complex distillation system where the entire body of that essential oil, if it's pure, is the oil from the plant. There is nothing else in there. It is purely that plant. And that can lead to a lot of hazards because you're taking the basis of that plant and you are concentrating it down into tiny drops of oil. And that means you have to be really careful when using essential oils. Now, a lot of essential oils are flammable. So if you are planning on using an essential oil on a candle, I would always recommend diluting it with a base oil, at least somewhat, because you do have the potential, if that oil hasn't quite evaporated enough by the time you light the candle, your entire candle might just go woof, up in flames, and that isn't really what you want. You know, goals for a candle is for it to burn down like a normal candle and not for it to entirely burst into flames, which can happen if you are using a very flammable essential oil, especially if it's in high concentrations. So I would always recommend diluting that oil before you add it onto candles. Now, if you're planning on adding essential oil onto the skin, or if you're planning on breathing it in, I would also recommend diluting that oil. Now, I know it might seem counterintuitive, but you have to remember that that is the pure plant. And so if you have animals, if you yourself are sensitive to a particular plant, having the pure form on an oil diffuser, for instance, or an oil warmer, that pure oil is going to be released into the air and you are breathing that in. That is inside your lungs and it's going to be interacting with the membranes in your lungs. And so if you are allergic to a plant, if that plant is not safe to be breathed in or for it to interact with membranes, then having that released into the air where you are breathing it in is not going to be what you want. So I would always recommend diluting the oil if you're going to be using an oil diffuser, an oil warmer, and if you're planning on using it on your skin. Typically, in an oil warmer, you will often find people will use 1 drop of essential oil for 20 drops of base oil. That could be anything from olive oil, grapeseed oil, jojoba oil, almond oil, avocado oil. There's so much out there that you can use, but I would recommend diluting it. If you are using essential oil on the skin, please dilute it, please. Essential oil is absorbed by our bodies really, really easily, especially if you have any open wounds, any cuts, any dryness, that can enter your system exceptionally quickly. So I would always recommend diluting oils. Always dilute your oils. There are no oils on the market out there that are pure essential oils that I would ever trust putting directly on my skin. Now, the way you dilute an oil and the concentration really depends on the type of oil that you're working with and also the person that the oil is going to be used on. Typically, it's between a 0.5 and a 2% dilution depending on the type of oil that you're working with. Some oils are more potent and will cause negative effects at a lower concentration. Depending on the plant that the oil is derived from, some plants might have a 2% dilution rate, others might have a 0.5, and it's really important to not push those percentages. Those percentages are recommended for a reason. It really all depends on your age as well as medical conditions. So if in doubt, go as low a percentage as you can to make sure it's as safe as you can. And remember that in there is still the pure plants. If you're using it for spellwork and ritual, if you're using it for aromatherapy, that plant is still in there, even if it's not punching you in the face with fragrance. It is just important to make sure that you are doing your research to make sure that you aren't putting yourself in harm's way. That includes animals as well. And biggest rule of thumb, I would never recommend consuming essential oils. Please don't do that. I know that there are some companies in the market that do recommend adding it into water, and that kind of scares the living daylights out of me. So if in doubt, don't ever put essential oils into your body. Don't put it into drinking water. Don't put it into food. It is very, very different to use it diluted in an oil warmer versus consuming it. So please, essential oils, typically use them with great care. If you're handling a pure oil, wash your hands thoroughly afterwards. Keep it out of children's reach as well as animals, just to make sure that everyone is safe. So lastly, we do have spellwork and spirits. The general health and safety of things that you should know while you're doing active magical practice. The things that you might overlook because you're focusing on the energy work, you're focusing on the spirits, you're focusing on the steps that you are undertaking for that spellwork and ritual. It's always important to remember that you need to be doing the mundane safety as well as the magical safety. And I think a lot of people do tend to forget that. Now, a lot of people use candles, myself included. I love me a bit of candle magic, so it's really important that candle safety is always adhered. Now, I've seen a lot of TikToks recently where people have candles balanced precariously on surfaces that are not safe, candles that are surrounded by fabric and paper, and it stresses me out. I am like the mother in the group, okay? I am that person who worries about everyone else's safety. And so I think it's really important to remember, please always make sure a candle is stable before you light it. Either using a candle holder or use the technique that I do where I will get a plate like a saucer and I will use a lighter to burn, like melt the bottom of a candle, and then I will stick it onto a plate. And that way, once you've checked that it's secure, you can then light that candle and it's not going to fall over. Though, if you do have candle holders are considerably safer, and I would always recommend using candle holders. You can still put items around it, you can put petitions underneath it, you can put spell papers underneath it, you can put items around it, but it's much better for it to be in a safe location, away from other things, so away from flammable objects, away from pets, away from children, on a stable, flat surface, in a candle holder or secured than just floating around, because I've seen some videos that scare me of people just having candles just lying around, and that is like a terrifying environment for me, because first and foremost, we need to keep you guys safe, and myself, obviously, I need to keep myself safe as well. So next up is incense. Now, this is something that's so popular for people to use, and this is mainly for those that might have breathing conditions or animals. A lot of pets, especially birds and rodents, are really, really sensitive to smoke. So if you are planning on using incense, please make sure that they are not going to be present in the space while you're doing it. And also make sure that your area is ventilated. Certain incenses are going to need more ventilation than others. So I typically find that shop-bought stick or cone incense is typically okay to be burned inside. But if you're going to be using loose incense, it's typically better to be used either on an incense warmer. These are similar to oil warmers where there's a tea light underneath and you place the incense on top and it gives the energy of that incense and the fragrance without all of the smoke, or burn it outside or in a very well ventilated space. But there are some incenses like loose incense or powder incense that produces a lot of smoke, and they should really be done outside. They will set your fire alarms off. Please have fire alarms if you don't already. Please, I would very much recommend getting fire alarms. They will set fire alarms off, so it's worth doing them either outside or in a very well ventilated space. And if you don't have those options, you can also use what's known as an incense warmer. These are a bit like oil diffusers and oil warmers where it's a tea light at the bottom of a container and then you put the loose incense on top, and it gives you the energy of that incense and the fragrance without all of the smoke. So it's a good option if you do have pets and if you don't have a large outdoor ventilated space that you can use. Now, this also applies for smoke cleansing. I did a video a few weeks ago all about smoke cleansing, and in that it's important to note that you really need to be doing this in a ventilated space. If you, anyone present in the house, children have asthma, if you have any pets, please make sure that they are not present while you're doing it. And also, if you are going to be doing smoke cleansing, make sure that you are not dropping any ashes, anything that's burning. Make sure that you are always being safe, having a dish underneath what you're doing to make sure you aren't putting your environment at risk, because in the UK anyway, most of our rooms have carpet in them. And so if I was to go round with a rosemary bundle, for instance, and I've got bits of on fire rosemary dropping on the floor, I do run the risk of setting fire to my carpet, which isn't something I really want to do. So please make sure that you're catching anything that's falling. If you are using sticks of any kind, like rosemary or mugwort or lavender, just make sure that nothing is falling that's on fire or hot, because that could end in absolute disaster. Now, another thing that has the potential to end in disaster is leaving candles burning unattended. I know it's very basic spiel, but I feel like it's important to mention. I know a lot of practitioners will be burning candles in bathtubs and they'll leave it burning all night. I personally would never take the risk of that just because I'm paranoid. I am that person that checks their doors 5 times every single night because I forget whether I've already checked it and I feel like I need to check it again. I'm that kind of a person. So I personally would say, if you have a spell candle or a ritual candle that's going to take many, many hours to burn and you need to go to bed, you need to have a shower, you need to go out for a while, snuff the candle out and then relight it again when you come back. It's much safer to do it that way than leave it burning and run the risk of it falling over or something hitting it or an animal bumping into it and it falls over. You know, it's just generally much safer to put the candles out and then relight them again when you come back. Now, along the same line of burning things, please make sure that if you are going to be burning any petitions, any photographs, any spell items in cauldrons, that you do have the ability to put out that fire nearby. This is overlooked so often. I've overlooked it myself and I try desperately to not overlook it anymore. If you have a small little cauldron, you can just have a glass of water nearby that you can use to put out a fire if it does become uncontrollable. Or you can use a fire blanket. These are really common in rented accommodation, as well as fire extinguishers. I know it's not ideal, but it's much better to be safe than sorry, especially if you're burning things that potentially have items in them that might be really, really flammable. There are certain inks that you can use that are really, really flammable, and these can really take you by surprise if you're not expecting it. So if in doubt, have a glass or jug of water nearby as like bare minimum, or have the ability to get it outside really quickly. Sand is another really good option. Just make sure that you're keeping yourself safe. Now, one thing that not many people seem to talk about is the use of personal effects and the safety while doing it. Now, this includes blood, saliva, other probably less savoury things depending on your magical practice. If you are planning on using these items, please make sure that you are doing it safely. I have met so many beginners that are wanting to use a drop of their blood in a working and they are not doing it safely. Please always be sanitary with everything that you are doing and know that if you don't want to use any of these items or you don't feel comfortable doing so in a way you feel safe, you can substitute it out for something else. So if you don't want to use blood, there are lots and lots of other options. You can use nail clippings, you can use hair, you can use saliva, you can use full names. There's lots of things that you can use to attach a working onto you or someone else if you aren't able or don't feel comfortable doing something safely. There are other options. And lastly, just a general thing to keep you safe in magical practice is to make sure that you can walk before you can run. With that I mean, don't jump into something if you don't know how to get yourself out of it. There are so many people who desperately want to do a certain practice, and they will start with witchcraft or whatever form of magical practice they begin with, and they will jump headfirst into it, even if they don't know how to get themselves out of a bad situation. So this means don't summon anything if you don't know how to banish it. Don't do spell work and ritual unless you know how to release that energy. Generally speaking, it's always better to be over-prepared. Know how to protect yourself, know how to raise and release energy, know how to clear unwanted energy. If you are wanting to summon anything, know how to banish it. These things are always really important. Typically speaking, I would always recommend going into a spell or ritual with more information than you are ever going to need. Because that way, if something goes wrong, you will know how to go around it. Instead of what a lot of people do is they will get into something they don't know how to get out of. and then they panic, and then they can ultimately make it worse for themselves. I know it can be really, really exciting to jump headfirst into spellwork and ritual, but I always recommend research first, practice later, because ultimately your practice is going to thank you for it because you're going to have more knowledge going into it, but also it does stop bad things from happening. Things like spirit attachments, hauntings, backfires, all that kind of stuff that you probably want to avoid. So I know that this was a whole lot of stuff. It was a whole lot of information to cram into one video, but I have had a lot of people wanting me to walk through just some of the things that I do every day, just as general witchcraft, health and safety. And I found in my experience online and in the communities as a whole, a lot of people will talk about spiritual health and safety, but they won't necessarily talk about the physical health and safety that should be added into spiritual and magical practice. And I think it's something really important is that if we are doing candle magic, we do need to know candle safety. And if we are working with herbs and plants, we do need to know a little bit of the background and the interactions of that. And so this video might have been exceptionally tedious and exceptionally boring, but I think it's a really important topic that we need to talk about more, because especially in short form media, and I saw it a lot on the TikTok video, I cut most of them out actually, is that a lot of people are showing themselves doing things that are potentially dangerous. And if someone with no understanding of why it could be dangerous does that for themselves, they then run the risk of putting themselves in danger. So I think safety should really come first. That applies to physical safety and also magical safety as well. So I hope that you did enjoy this video. If you did, feel free to give it a like. It really means so much to me. If you do have any questions, comments, concerns, video ideas, or you just want to chit chat with the community, feel free to put a comment down in the comment section. We do also have a Discord server if you want to chat more about witchcraft and magical practice. As I mentioned earlier, it's linked in the description box. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel, in this video, feel free to subscribe. I do try my best with magical content every single week. And usually it's not health and safety. Promise. This is just a really important topic that I thought I really should cover. So I hope you guys are all staying safe. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Yeah, I am just scratching my ears. Don't mind me. I've not worn earrings in so long, they're so itchy! Do you like my earrings? They're beetles. Aren't they cute? They're really adorable. I'm in such a weird mood today, by golly. Let me get up my notes. Oh, I got a new phone case. Do you like it? It has bats on it. It's really cute. Sorry, off topic. I managed to do that outro in like one breath, and I don't even think I got a word out. I think it was just like, and then that was it. But hey, let's hope for the best.